Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining another Tuesday night live stream. Tonight, I am extremely excited to be talking to both of the gentlemen I've got with. It's been a brand that I think a lot of you are already familiar with, but I wanted to touch on more than just the brand, but more the people behind it and really everything that kind of is involved with it. So I think tonight is going to be an awful lot of fun from that standpoint, just learning more. So if for some reason this is a new brand for you, I think this is going to truly give you some insight as to why and how the brand really became. So that will be the fun part of tonight, I think. In addition to learning more about the whiskeys that they offer, the cigars, but just kind of tying it all together. So. Let's see. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's bring on the gentleman of the evening, and we will get this thing going. So, Mr. Tim Young, how are you, sir?
Oh, great. Thank you.
Mr. Hooten, how are you, sir?
Doing great. Good to see you.
Thank you very much for joining me tonight. And I've got to say, first and foremost, thank you very much for your service. Without that, we wouldn't have the opportunity to be able to do these things that we're doing tonight. So thank you for that first and foremost.
Thanks, Scott. It was a privilege and an honor to serve.
Thank you. So let's do this. So as we kind of were talking a little bit before we were live, what I want to really do is kind of get into, besides the brand and the whiskey, before it was Hooten Young, what did things look like for each of you leading up to that, and kind of how did it all get started between the two of you? And I'll let whoever it is wants to go first go ahead.
Tim, I'll let you start.
Oh, really? Generally, I like to start with you, Norm, because you had the best story. It's interesting because my background has been mostly financial and accounting. So, in some way I've lived overseas and so forth and whatever. And I'm going to tell you this, how we led up to this is that, when you find some common elements of a friend, is that I grew up in Texas, went to Baylor in Texas, and I will always be a Texan. And to find a good friend that is very rooted by the same area. He's from Texas as well, Norm is. And that, but my background's always been about, financial entrepreneurship, building brands or building companies and that kind of stuff. So I've done a lot of acquisition merger stuff, but, I never really fell in love with that. My deal was, I told my wife one day, I said, this is probably one thing that I actually love doing. And I love to smoke cigars and I love to drink whiskey. And thank God that we are here today doing that. So, I really don't have an extensive background. Norm is the one that is a lot more fun to talk about because we're not fun, but, more interesting than mine is because I'm pretty much a black and white kind of guy. I'm a financial guy. But Norm, why don't you lead off on your experience?
Yeah, Tim's been a little humble. He's had a lot of success in the business world, and on top of it, managed to stay just a super great guy. And we actually met through our association with the United States Military Academy at West Point. His son went to West Point. My son went to West Point. So that's how we met. But leading up to that, I grew up in Texas, like Tim said, West Texas, a little town called Brackettville. And family was a blue collar family most of the time, working on a ranch or working in the oil fields or whatever they could do out there in West Texas to scratch out a living. Joined the Army right out of high school, served in Special Forces for over 20 years, and then got out, did a few more things for the government, and then ended up going to pharmacy school very late in life, and which is how I ended up in Orlando and met Tim. And like Tim said, we just hit it off immediately. Had fun. We just Tim would come over. He'd call me up and say, "Hey, midnight. I'm on my way over to your house with a cigar and some whiskey." I'd say, "No, Tim, I'm already in bed." And then 5 minutes later, my front door would open up and there he'd be. But we had a lot of fun before we started the business. We became very good friends. We enjoyed cigars and whiskey together. And really, it was the the experience that we shared together and the camaraderie that we developed through our relationship, but using cigars and whiskey to do that. And so, fast forward a couple of years after we met, I had a very special bunch of guys at Fort Bragg, North Carolina that I served with that had been in Somalia in 1993. And I wanted to make cigars for them to celebrate the anniversary of that particular battle. And Tim knew somebody. We put together 300 cigars, took them up there for the event, and everybody liked them, and they started wanting to buy more of them. And the problem was that we weren't really in the cigar business. We were in the cigar smoking business. And so we quickly cobbled something together as a label on a cocktail napkin, and then kicked it off from there. And then shortly followed that up with the whiskey, because, you can't fully enjoy a cigar unless you have a good whiskey with it.
Yeah. And I like that part of the story, because oftentimes people ask me, and I'm sure the same thing with you guys, is, why the cigar and why the whiskey? And I think oftentimes, as good as it is to have both of those quality as a pair, that's not always kind of like the game. The idea is like you just mentioned, Tim would show up at your place with some cigars and some whiskey, and the next thing you know, 2, 3, 4 hours later, you guys are still heavy in conversation. And I think that's always been the fantastic part of it for me, is tying those two together and allowing for that time to pass, good conversation, and all of that. You can tell that with probably both of you, that you each have kind of that side of it where there's probably a lot of banter that goes on when you're having those fine cigars and some nice whiskey to pair with it.
Well, let me just say this.
Before you start, Tim, I'm going to give you a little warning about Tim. So we have a little saying we say about Tim on the team, and that is, if you're with Tim Young for an hour, you'll still be with him in the morning. So, but then and there's a lot of stories about that, but I'll kick it back over to Tim.
No, I'll tell you, Scott, when we first met, you cannot have met two different people, right? With his military background and my finance, but for some reason we found a lot in common. It was just the weirdest element. When I first met Norm the first time, I looked at him and I said, "Where are you from?" And from Texas. And we started saying all these commonalities. We went to the same camp together in Texas called Lakey. His sister went to Baylor. I mean, it was just this weird thing. And his mother's maiden name was Young. And so just these weird kind of attributes that came together, like going, wow, we have a lot more in common than our background deals. So what happens is that, we have fought together. I mean, arguments, all that kind of stuff, just like brothers would do. But I tell you, I'd rather have an argument with him than anybody else, because it's always fun to banter with him. But at the same time, too, is when we first started, we were drinking Buffalo Trace, and we were smoking Monte Cristo White Series cigars. Mm-hmm. That's what we liked. That's what we smoked. That's what we drank. It was easy to get, whatever. And then when Norm calls me, when he says we're sitting together, and I said, he said, well, we need to get in the cigar business. And I said, okay, great. And I went to my wife. I said, sweetheart, we're going to get into the cigar business. She said, well, whatever you don't sell, you're going to smoke. And we looked at each other and we went, okay, we're good with that. And so that's how it all started from there. And then, progressively through anything is that, you start talking about theming, and you got the Gothic Serpent to the Overlord and so forth. And the series of boxes we have are really to tell that story. And we have a mantra that we talk about, made to remember. Our deal is, we always want to remember those who served and those currently that have passed away and so forth in the military. It's remember those stories. How do we keep the story alive? And so, when you're sitting back and you're winding down and you're having a smoke, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because my screen just, I don't know, it keeps on going off and on. Is that what happens is that you have this ability to talk about the stories and talk about the soldiers and talk what they've done currently in the past. The TVs don't go on. We don't even look at our phones. I mean, it's just about us having a conversation like the old days versus all these guys on their phones, and that's all their life is, about the phone and watching TikTok. and so forth, which I'll let you know. Norm's a big TikTok guy, and he got me hooked on it. Is that we basically have found ourselves really enjoying the people we're around, and we have met a ton of folks on both sides, on the cigar and whiskey side, that have told us their stories, and it's been great to listen to them. There's been wonderful people out there. But we're going back a little bit. When Norm called me up, I was living in California at the time, and he says to me, "Tim, we should get in the whiskey." And I says, "What the hell do we know about whiskey, except for drinking it?" So I knew a guy. It was his wedding about 30-something years ago. His name was George Miliotis. And George is a really good guy. He has a place down here at Disney Springs called Wine Bar George. And George, we went over and saw him. We talked about it. And at this point, I'd moved from California to Hong Kong. And George called me up and said, "Hey, Tim, I can't get anybody to return my calls. I can't get the reps or anybody to help us out." So I go on LinkedIn, and I give a lot of credit to it, because I would never have thought in a million years that if I went on there and found the president of MGP, would they actually return a message. The next day, I got a message from the president of MGP, and we ended up with the VP of the whole plant at MGP, the only customer he really had. And so, we always kind of contribute that because we just have a great story, and we're all about the integrity base. We're always about, hey, our story is what it is. I mean, Norm has a wonderful story to tell. I mean, he's got more than you can imagine. When I first started meeting Norm, we were sitting there talking. I thought, Norm's going to give us a fish story. This fish is this big, right? But it really isn't. To find out later on, I started meeting some of his buddies that are operators and so forth, and they started telling me the real story. Now, the real story is Norm told me a little story. The story is actually bigger. And it was amazing, the stories that he has. I mean, he's got 100 missions or plus whatever. He's been all over the place. And he spent 22 years in the Army, and he's been that guy. He's a horrible shooter in shotguns, but he can shoot a rifle and a 9mm, but he cannot shoot a shotgun with crap. I'm better. And that's the only thing I'm better than him on something. But it's been fun to go through this process this last 5 years. We've been doing the whiskey about 3.5 years, and we've learned a hell of a lot. Somebody says, "Oh my gosh, Tim, you guys know so much about whiskey." I went, "No, we've had to ingrain it. We've had to learn it from people. We keep our mouth shut and just take it all in." And but one thing is, when we went to MGP to get to look at this whiskey, and it was the funniest moment. If you were there, you'd laugh your head off. Nora and I end up laughing a lot, because after the first 5 rows of tasting glasses of whiskey, different mashes and so forth, about the second row, I can't spit the stuff out. I mean, I was like going, this stuff's just too good. I'm going to drink it. About the second row, I think I was falling off my chair. Norm's taking a video, and he's about to fall out of his chair. And our master somm, George, was sitting at the other end of the table, and he's like, "I told you guys you should spit it out." And I'm like, "I ain't spitting this stuff out. This is too damn good." I mean, don't take a guy who loves whiskey to a whiskey place. Not
o'clock in the morning.
So what was that again?
All before 9 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah, you should see us going. You should see us go in the airport trying to go through TSA. I'm like going, somebody better hold me up going through this thing. But I will tell you this is that it's been. Listen, we've all have our ups and downs. We've had trial and errors and so forth, and between what kind of bottle to the capsule to whatever, it has been a challenge. But it's been a fun challenge, and it's been a great experience through these last 3.5 years. Norm, do you want to add on to that?
No, everything you said is true, and I think we were third or fourth row of whiskeys, and I think we'd probably had 25 shots of whiskey before 9 o'clock in the morning, and with us all day. So yeah, that is true. But it's been a fun ride. We're really enjoying it. We really put a lot of thought into the symbolism of our products and the culture that we really kind of want to commemorate and represent. Like Tim said, our motto is "Made to Remember," and we came up with that motto when we first made our first run of Gothic Serpent cigars. We asked ourselves, why do we want to do this? And the answer was, we just want to remember some very special people who contributed amazingly to their country, and it was just an obvious choice. Made to remember became our corporate motto, and it is really behind everything that we do.
Well, and I was going to say the awesome part about that is that's tying everyone else's story, good, bad, indifferent, the unfortunate, all of that. That's tying all of that together to make you the representation of that entire group, so you can tell there is some passion and that I'm trying to find like the right word for that. It's I'm sure a lot of these guys that you've served with and have worked with and everything, they become family very, very quickly, so I'm sure you dedicating a part of what it is that both of you do to honor them is just as important as you guys doing what it is you do on a daily basis.
Absolutely. The thing is, to us, you think about it, and let's go back a little bit. 2020 is when we first made our first sale, and that was really middle of COVID. We met with a guy named John Carlos that came down from RNEC, flew down, and everything was shutting down, right? Only thing was open with grocery stores and liquor stores. Yeah. And so in May of 2020 is when we made our first sale. And ironically enough, there's a guy named Babish. What's his name? Babesh. And I call him a lot of different names. Habibi, I'm going to call him everything. But it's funny is that Norm and I went into this place with a guy named Kevin, and it was our first sale, trying to be our first sale. We walk into this liquor store, and the guy says, I'm not sure. I'll buy one case. But Norm said, well, listen, if you don't sell it, we'll buy it back at retail. Well, Norm, what happened the following week?
Yeah, it was so he bought one case, and the deal was if you don't sell it in a month, we will buy it back at retail, full retail cost in 30 days. And again, like Tim said, it was right in the middle of COVID. So our distributor, they had basically locked their sales force down, so nobody was out selling either on premise or to the liquor store. So we found a local distributor right there in Orlando who said, hey, I may be able to help you out. And then we went in to see Bavesh at little place called and that was the deal we made with him. And the very next day he said, hey, I need 50 more cases. I sold everything I had. Plus I took orders for back orders for 50 cases. So we moved over there, and that was our first exposure to selling whiskey. It was right in the middle of COVID, and after everybody was shut down. So, and I can't remember how many we sold, but we our distributor had projected a certain amount of cases, and I can't remember the count, but Tim could probably tell you. And I think we tripled their case count projections for the first quarter of that year.
Well, we sold actually 943 cases in 3 months. That I had already left to go back to overseas, and I get a call, and they said, hey, we've ran out. I said, ran out of what? And so then what happened was we came back and said, oh, God, we got to regroup here. How do you do this a little bit better and so forth? And we started getting better and better and better, the bottles and so forth. And so, and then the following year, so we've now moved from one state of Florida. Now we're in 21 states after 3.5 years. We sell into about 30-something. Courtney, who's on the phone, can tell us, but I think it's like 34. Is that right, Norm?
And we're in like 21, but we're online in 34, 36 states.
Okay.
Yep. And, we don't understand. People say, how'd you do it? We really don't know. I mean, we just worked hard at it. We have good people. We have, Courtney, which Scott, and a group of guys, Mark Taylor and all and that, and Joel and George, and it goes on and on and on. But most of it's all been organically grown. People we know, we told people, hey, listen, go to your local liquor store and ask for Hooten Young. And that was the first approach. Hey, go ask your local liquor store. And if they didn't have, make sure they ask their distributor. But we have not been a force, and I would say we didn't do a good job. We were conservatively driven on spend the money on the right thing. Mm-hmm. Now we're at the point now we're in 21 states, and we're like going, oh crap, we need to be a few more states, but we need to kind of grow up marketing wise. And so it has over the period of time, and we've made some good friends with Horse Soldier for one. I mean, Scotty and John are just good friends. I mean, we get great advice. Everybody's in it together. We're not against any other brands. We love them all. We all taste a little different. We try to stay true to the barrel itself. I mean, if you look at some of our bottles, it's we only proof it down. It comes out of the barrel, and we just proof it down to what we think is drinkable. And that's how we really kind of started this whole thing. It was a miraculous. Even my wife still says, "I can't believe you guys have gotten this far," because she thought for sure Norm and I would have just bailed out of this about the first year and said, "Hey, we're just going to buy it for us, and we're just going to drink it."
Was the idea, like, I guess early on was probably, I hate to say, like, kind of a drop whiskey and hope that this stuff sells, but was the idea always to kind of tie cigars and whiskey together, knowing what that combo kind of meant to you guys?
Yes, it was for me. I because it was my analogy would be, it's kind of like sitting around a campfire, the modern day campfire together. And one story that I like to tell is about how my son Noah, who was at West Point, came home from West Point for summer break, and I walked in the house from work, and I wasn't really an avid cigar smoker. I would enjoy one from time to time, but this is right about the time just before I met Tim. But I smelled cigars, and I asked my wife. I said, "Hey, I smell cigar smoke." She goes, "Yeah, your son's on the back porch smoking a cigar and having a whiskey." So I went out there with him and sat down. And 4 hours later, I realized that I'd spent my whole life, raising this fine young man, but I'd never spent 4 hours in deep conversation with him. And that all happened over a whiskey and a cigar. So it's a special experience for me. And I can tell you stories about countless nights where Tim and I have watched the sun come up on his back porch, drinking and smoking a cigar. And it just really is a great way to connect with people, which is the most important part of it for us.
Yeah.
Well, that's the reason why they gave me the name Diablo, because if you were here after an hour, you probably found 3 and 4 in the morning going, "Are we still drinking, smoking? What time is it?" And you go, "Oh, geez, it's 4 o'clock in the morning." And so we had some great times. We still do, but now we've kind of get Norm moved to South Georgia, and he doesn't live down the street, so I can't go to his house at 12 o'clock at night. And it's kind of, some of my old neighbors here won't let me go past 12 o'clock. But I will tell you this is that, let you know, Courtney actually said in the comments was we're in 24 states and we ship to 36. I don't know if anybody saw that.
Yeah.
And so it's been funny because the story that he has with Noah, his son, is that Tyler and Austin, my 2 sons, in some way it brought us a little bit more together because, I didn't really have a whole lot in common. They're 28 and 30 and so forth. So, but they love experiences, no different than Noah and Mason and Norm's daughter, Rachel. Rachel is one of our biggest advocates at University of Alabama. She's pushing everything out there. I will not say Roll Tide, but Norm will. And yeah, you lost it, man. It should be, Longhorns. We just, it's just weird how it all happened. And we continue to grow. Now, we are doing something kind of different this year. I don't know if Courtney told you, Scott, is that we're doing an event in Abilene, Texas. That we were doing print. We were naive about this, about how doing print ad and so forth and whatever. And we start thinking, well, how many people look at newspapers or who looks at a magazine? Very few people do.
Yeah.
And so, but versus taking that money is the podcast way to go. And number 2 is really direct to consumer. It's just like how we started with, hey, go ask your local store in regards to buying Hooten Young. So we're doing an event at the end of March called Outlaws and Legends. There's about 18 to 20,000 people are going to be there. A bunch of bands are going to be there and so forth. And it's going to be a big event for us because we can actually meet the consumer itself directly versus just the liquor store. Because at the end of the day, the liquor store is going to carry what the people want. And so once they've actually tried our stuff, then what happens is then they stick with it, right? So currently right now, I don't know if you know her well or not, but we end up with don't we have 7 different lines right now, Norm?
Something like that. Yeah, if you count the wine cast finish. I think we're
yeah, it looked like several. I had been looking some stuff up, and that was one of the things I was impressed with, because oftentimes, I'll say, smaller-ish brands don't want to overextend and have all of these different lines. They want to try to keep it a little bit tighter and maybe out to the masses a little bit more. But I would say I give you a lot of credit for kind of getting outside the box and really kind of challenging yourselves by, introducing some different finishes and some ryes and utilizing the American whiskey, kind of category of maybe a little bit more than a lot of other people do, because I still think it's oftentimes, I don't want to say underrated, but I think people question what it is and why sometimes, and want to not want to focus as much on that as they do bourbon. But if people really truly understood how very similar oftentimes American whiskey really is, only because it's got to be as a category because of some particular fault that happened, you're still getting oftentimes the same thing. So that's why when I saw what you guys were doing, I applauded you for kind of going down that avenue and really focusing really heavy on the American whiskey side of things.
Yeah, I do want to go back back in 2020. In addition to that, it was about August before I left for Hong Kong again, and someone tells us we have 8 expressions. Okay, so what happens is I was going to talk to you about before I left is that we got a call from a guy named Mark Taylor. He's one of our shareholders and partners and stuff, and he lives up in Virginia, and he's good friends with a guy named Jack Carr. I don't know if you've heard the guy named Jack Carr, who wrote a bunch of books, did the terminal list with Chris Pratt and all that kind of stuff. But at that time, we got a call from the producer and said, "Hey, can you send us 4 bottles of your stuff?" I said, "Sure, I'll send you 4 bottles." Well, I didn't think they wanted empty bottles. I didn't have it. Well, I did have a few of them because I finished them. But so I sent the 4 bottles, sent it off to some producer in Utah. And who knew, right? Yeah. And so we didn't think anything more about it. They said, "Oh, it might be put in a film. It might not be in this. It might not be in that." I said, "We don't care. I mean, we sent 4 bottles and everybody's going to be happy drinking it." And then was it last year? So a couple of years later, 2 years later, we get a call a couple of weeks before it was aired and said, "Hey, you need to look at these episodes of the Terminal List on Amazon Prime." And we went, "Okay, sounds good. We're going to watch this film, whatever." But then it's at the first 20 minutes or 10 minutes, something like that, Norm? Is that
20 minutes, episode 1.
Yes. And Chris Pratt saying, "Have a Hooten Young on me." And his email says Hooten Young on it. And we're like, holy crap. I mean, and just because we gave them 4 bottles 2 years ago, I mean, it was like, okay, how's this happen? And that it actually forged a relationship with Jack that we end up with a 16-year-old bottle. It's called Jack Carr on it. And it's 125 proof. And it's done super well for us, but he promotes it. It's, it's his name and so forth, that he wants to do another line with us, and he wants to do a cigar with us, and he wants to put it in his next film, so forth. And we can't explain how that happens, right? Because it just happens. People ask us to do things, and we show up in a magazine. We're like, "Well, how do we get in that magazine?" And they said, "Well, we love you that much that we want to put you in the magazine." Okay. But it's been a great trip so far.
Well, I've always kind of said, good things happen to good people. Oftentimes I don't think it's always just luck or whatever it may be, and sometimes there's a little bit of that. But you kind of get into the karma side of things, and I think oftentimes good things happen to good people, and when you've got that about you and you're authentic and people recognize that, then I think that goes a long way in a lot of businesses. And I think maybe even more so in this industry, when you're combining both cigars and whiskey, just kind of like the stories you both have talked about, it becomes very, very personal. And, like you're talking, sharing those moments with your kids or whatever it may be, there are these things that allow people to kind of come together. And even though, they reached out to you, you sent off, a few bottles to a producer that you didn't know what was going to happen or whatever it may have been. and there you go. This is the next thing that happens. And now you've developed a relationship with them, and, you who knows where that goes. Right. So I think there's always, like I said, good things happen to good people. And it's nice to see that kind of stuff, kind of grassroots kind of stuff for you guys. And that's a big deal, right?
It is. Let's talk for a moment, the series of bottles that we did.
Yes.
It's interesting is that we started off with the 12-year-old. We went up to MGP and we bought 1,000 something bottles over a period of time. Now we're over like 3,400 barrels now, I think. And still that we currently have, and we're buying more and buying more, is that, we always wanted to be true to what, here's the thing is, so somebody asked me, so why did you pick a whiskey, a light whiskey? And I said, well, at the end of the day, I went to a couple liquor stores, more than one. I probably went to about 10, and I did not see a 12-year-old light whiskey on the shelf. Mm-hmm. And I said, versus trying to compete with somebody else, why don't we try to find our own niche, right? And you would think over 100 years, everybody finds their niches, right? And then we started off with the 12, and then we went to a 12 barrel proof. Then we got moved to 15, and then we decided, George Milio said, hey, why don't we do a wine cast? And I said, well, what's that? And of course, what you do is you take one of our barrels is a Camus barrel, and we have the Camus barrels, and we put our 6-year-old whiskey in it and let it sit in there and whatever. And we did the same thing with the Honig, which is the cab, and we did one with the Zinfandel as well. And the difficult part of that is when you get the barrels, you don't know if they're going to be watertight. Right. So when they come in, they got to put water because you don't know if they've been sitting there and they fall apart and all that kind of stuff. The first time we did it did perfect. Right. The barrels did well. The second time we did it, half of the barrels exploded. Right. They just fell apart. They wouldn't hold any water. And so we kind of had to wait on that a little bit. So we did that. We still have some of those bottles out there. It's actually pretty dang good. It really kind of hit a different element, but it was something different. Right. It was that wine cast that no one really had. And then we actually morphosized into the 15, the 16-year-old. But we're going to roll around to where we are today with our newest bottle. And, Norm and I talked about this for the longest time about, we're really not rye drinkers. And we always, I'll tell you, I hate to tell you, we drink bourbon and drink whiskey, right? 99% corn, 1% barley. We just love it, right? Mm-hmm. In the state of Alabama, it'd be called corn liquor, but it's better than that because it's been barrels for a long period of time. But saying that is that we came up with this rye, and obviously it shook us. We said, "Oh my gosh, this stuff is just great! It's super good stuff."
Yeah,
and it changed my whole attitude. When you go through Angel's Envy and you go to Whistle Pig and you go all the different ryes, and generally most of that stuff's made at MGP. Why does it taste different? Whatever, right? And I got to tell you honestly, when we did this rye that you have with you now, it's a 6-year-old rye, and this really, and I want Norma to talk about it because it was more special to us than just being a new line or a new expression. Is that it is? It really means more. And Norm, why don't you explain to the bottle sitting right there in front of Scott now? Is explain the front of that bottle.
Yeah. So Scott, fast forward. I talked to you about the cigars and how we kind of got started in the business together by giving away gifts to a very special bunch of guys at Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty. That was the 25th anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu. The Battle of Mogadishu was code-named Operation Gothic Serpent. So 5 years later, 2023, October 3rd, which is the anniversary of that date, we wanted to do something special again to commemorate that particular event and recognize that very, very special group of people. And so we didn't want to do something that we had done before. And I think Tim and I can't remember who came up with it first, so maybe we should try a rye. But like Tim said, neither one of us are rye whiskey guys, right? I like corn liquor, man. And it's not that I didn't really like rye. I just preferred corn-based whiskey. But we got the rye, and we decided that the symbolism of the label and how we packaged it, marketed it was going to be what was special for the people. So we named it after the operation. So Operation Gothic Serpent 30 years later. And we tried to incorporate elements that would be subtly symbolic of people who had been there on that very, very difficult day 30 years before. So we put wings on the label to kind of give a nod to the helicopter pilots that were there. Special Forces Dagger was there to to the special operators that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, our brand, Hooten and Young, the H and the Y is on there because that's who we are. But we proofed it down to 93 proof because the battle happened in 1993. I had a lot of people tell me, you don't want to let this go at less than 100 proof. You want to keep it at 100 proof. But it was a very special. I stuck to it and said, I'm going to do it at 93 proof. And we'll just do a short run of it, and it'll be a commemorative bottle. But I've had a lot of commemorative whiskeys.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I'll buy a commemorative whiskey once, just because of the occasion. And most of them don't draw me back because they taste good.
Yeah. This
particular whiskey is it's become my go-to whiskey. I normally drink the black label, the 92 proof, 99% corn, 1% barley. But this is my new favorite, and it's just a delicious expression of rye whiskey.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, before we went live, I was kind of sipping on it a little bit just to kind of get a little bit more reintroduced to it. And again, it has that really beautiful, there's that mint, a little bit of citrus. There's definitely some of those rye notes. There's a lot more that's been retained in this whiskey at 93 proof than I've had with some that have been even, higher proof than this. The one thing I'll also say is as you sip on it, it is velvety, creamy. It is, dare I say, smooth. It is all of that. But I think even at 93 proof, it still has a nice little finish, nice, good rye notes all the way through, which is good. Little kind of some hints of that black pepper, which is nice because I think oftentimes people think they have to always drink high proof to get all of those flavors. So the blending that you guys have done, I think, with this to get it at 90 proof has not only been, I think, successful, it's a really nice sipping whiskey. And I always question a lot of people who are cigar smokers that maybe challenge yourself more with rye with cigars than even bourbon and cigars. I love the pairing. Like, I find myself far more often pairing cigars with rye whiskey because I like how they both work together. Again, that depends on the kind of cigar I think you're smoking too. But yeah, I think what you guys have done with this with 93 proof is fantastic. So great job, whoever it is that's doing the blending for you guys or whatever. Maybe it's you, but I'll tell you what, it's a really, really nice little whiskey.
Well, Norm, you talked about why it's 93 proof, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, I was stuck on the proof because of the significance of the date, and it worked out well. But really had nothing more to do than we went to war in October 3rd, 1993, and so we're going to make it 93 proof.
Yeah.
Now, let you know, Scott, is that once these bottles are sold with this label,
hold that up, Tim. I'll solo you, and you can show that. There you go.
Yeah. So on this bottle here, this is the last of the bottles. If you can find one of these, keep it, because guess what? Our new one's coming out to replace this. It's going to be a 7-year bottle. They will take the 30th anniversary off of it. It still will say Gothic Serpent on it and so forth, but it is changing. It's going to be same UPC and all that kind of stuff. The story changes a little bit in the back, but if you can get this bottle, it's a keeper because once you buy it, that's the last we're making.
Yeah, it is a really nice. I'll tell you, it's really oily. And at 90, at 93 proof, when I was moving this thing around and kind of sipping on it before, that was, I think, one of the big factors in what's contributing to this finish being much longer. And I guess here's a great question. Like I know Tim is smoking a cigar with this. how do you like kind of the balance of those two? Like, I know you were talking about not being much of a rye guy, but how are you enjoying that pairing?
Well, here's funny, Scott, is that so we decided to kind of grow our cigars from another market. Majority of our stuff was made, or actually all of it was made in Nicaragua and Esteli.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always been a little concerned that we probably needed to diversify where we get our cigars from. And so I was with one of my buddies from here, and he knew this master blender cigar maker down in Dominican Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And we go down. His name is Eladio Diaz, and apparently Eladio used to work for Davidoff, and he just went on his own and all that kind of stuff. And he sits there, and I said, "Well, I'll go ahead and I'll meet these." I brought some of the rye with me. And he looks at me. He goes, "I got one for you." I said, "What do you mean you got one for me?" He says, "I got the." He pulls out his many cigars he has there in his shop. He says, he pulls out a cigar and he says, "This is the Patriot. This is great pairing together." And I went, it was no shit moment. It's like, oh, we've never compared or had anybody tell us that our whiskey would be great with this cigar.
Yeah.
And so we end up coming out with a cigar that here's the front of the box here. And it is a 20 count, but I keep smoking them all. But I think I have one left in here, but it is basically it tells the story on it and so forth. And about Gothic Serpent, about being the 30th anniversary and so forth, and the 19 soldiers that died on that occasion. And, we're trying to remember those 19 that died. But the pairing between the two is perfect. I mean, we love it. I mean, Norm, what's your thoughts?
No, it is perfect. That's a great choice that he made there. I enjoy it with any cigar, but that's a really, really good cigar that goes great with a rye whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good one. I mean, you're talking about Nicaraguan stuff. So, you're going to have something with a little bit of heft behind it, and I'll say this admittedly, for that kind of tobacco holding up against a 93 proofer says more for the whiskey than it does necessarily for the cigar. So that's kudos for, to you for allowing this whiskey to retain those kinds of flavors. So,
yep.
Great
so
job.
we're really happy about that. We're actually coming out with 2 or 3 other different lines here in the next 9 months, and some more whiskey. So, we tell people, listen, keep watching for Hooten Young. Love, we can't wait to get to Wisconsin and see you in person. We just, we love what we're doing. And, I do want to mention this real quick. Norm, he's a pretty phenomenal guy. His whole story about working in special forces and then doing some other stuff with Homeland Security and so forth after 9/11. But you won't believe this. You're talking to a guy there that also has a doctorate in pharmacy. He's with the VA in the pharmacy group. He runs a whole division of them right now, and he's got a phenomenal job. And he's still giving back, even though he's not fighting the wars, but he's fighting a different cause now on that side. And I got to give him a lot of kudos for doing that.
Yeah, yeah. I thank you for doing all of that. I mean, to be that involved and make that a part of your life, and really for anybody who's sacrificed for 1 second to do the things that you do for all of us, you can't be thanked enough. So
again, it's an absolute privilege, and I appreciate it.
So let's do this. So I know rather than keep you guys all night. So I guess from now kind of going forward, what's the what do things look like for Hooten Young and kind of for the near future and maybe even beyond?
Norm, what's your plans?
Well, I'm gonna finish drinking a couple of glasses of, you said long term, right? So a couple of glasses of whiskeys for me. But no, we're having a lot of fun doing it. We're still exploring different expressions of whiskey. We have a very, very creative team of people that always have great ideas. And the cool thing about being part of a smaller company is that it doesn't very long to make decisions. So you can react very quickly and kind of do things that may take a bigger company a long time to do. And so we can make decisions and execute on those decisions, because really Tim and I are the guys that give the final nod one way or the other on it. So I'm excited about what the future brings. We're probably going to have another, like Tim said, another couple cigars come out this year. Still working on blends for those and some other ideas on whiskey. But we're going to.
And everybody can go to hootenyoung.com and find your whiskey and cigars, and you'll ship to, I think Courtney said it was several states. What was it, like 36 states?
Well, no, we could sell it to. So we have on our website, we have a kind of a dashboard where you can buy the whiskey, but it's through a third party called Speakeasy Co. And they can ship it into 34 states. I think what she was saying. I don't see the number now, but and then the rest of them are done through distributors within those states or control states. One thing is that once people get it in their state, for example, like, you're gonna play the video.
I'm just showing everybody kind of what things look like, where you can go and all of this.
If you go to the story, why don't you go to let people see it real quick? There's it says grab a drink and smoke. We've got quiet at the story. You see it, watch right there.
All right, let's roll a little clip here for you guys real quick.
A few years ago, a tight group of friends with a love of good cigars and strong whiskey decided to come together and share their passion. Hooten Young is dedicated to creating fine cigars and smooth spirits to those with a refined palate, but haven't lost their grit. But it's more than that. It's a brotherhood bonded by the love of freedom, family, honor, and tribute to the brave men and women of the armed forces who have gone above and beyond the call of duty.
We actually did that video. Gosh, was it, Norm, about the second year that we started? And so that's been a while back, and we got to do another one soon. Is that, our thing is we enjoy being around other people and talking about everything else. It involves politics to religion to everything. We just leave it all open, right? But at the end of the day, we still love each other, and we just kind of, bear and grin. And so I think we have a great story. I would say good, but it's a great story because, we only have 2 employees, and that's basically Courtney and another guy named Omar at this point. And essentially none of us get paid. We actually use the any funding we have goes back into the products or goes into veteran affairs. Like veteran organizations like Folds of Honor, the Unifunds, the whatever. We go through the whole gamut of giving back because, at the end of the day, we didn't do this for us. We did this for try to work with others and be with others and help others. And so we're a lot different than anybody. I just say it, but we're not like the typical guys out there that, we're trying to make a buck off of this because neither Norm and I get paid. But it's the compassion that we want to do this. And so it's very exciting. And we hope that within the next 3 or 4 years, I can't wait to see the stories going to be like, because, we never know. Somebody says, what's it going to be like next year? I'm still worried about next month. Or I'm worried about the month after. And so Norm and I, everybody says, well, what's your forecast? I don't know. The sky's the limit. But we just kind of keep pushing and moving the stuff. But interesting enough is that we did a cigar box called the Paladin. And we were with a guy named Bobby Newman from JC Newman. And Bobby says, you guys are really missing out on something. We said, what's that? And he said, well, you don't have a under $10 cigar. And Norm, why don't you expand on that for a moment?
Yeah, and we had heard that before. Our cigars are definitely premium cigars, and they're not, off the charts expensive, but they're not inexpensive either. And I still have sons serving in the military, one in the United States Marine Corps, one in the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I asked them, I said, hey, you guys ever go out and get those cigars? And they were like, Yeah, Dad, they're awesome, but none of those soldiers can really go out and afford to pay, that much money for what you kind of broke my heart. So I went back to Tim with it and talked to Tim and we found a way to basically still make an awesome cigar. And a lot of people that smoke our cigars consider that their favorite cigar. So it's by no means a cheap cigar. It's a high quality premium cigar, but it's less expensive than, it's probably about half the price of most of the things that we offer. But it makes me feel good that that the people that we actually do this for can go out and afford more readily afford the products that we sell, and it was a great success. But like Tim said, Bobby Newman got it into the Armed Forces Exchange System, and it's been a hit in that particular market.
Well, and I think the awesome part about that too is now you're allowing for some of those other, men and women that are serving to begin kind of their journey with that. And maybe who knows where this leads. And I like you both, it is one of those kind of, I'll still say, hobbies that allows you to just simplify and slow things down to the point it allows you to still have good conversation and not have to have your phone or devices in your face, and you can actually talk like people used to do, so it's a refreshing kind of thing. I always hate when people kind of start talking about, maybe they're not, so good for you. Well, if people really did research on cigars and health, though, they really truly understand how little there is of an effect versus like a cigarette. Like that is night and day. These are two completely different things. But anyway, hopefully people will allow for that combination to do what it does for the both of you. So,
Scott, one thing is that you mentioned, if everybody would just follow us on Instagram, Courtney and her group put stuff almost daily on stuff on Instagram that it actually shows where we're progressively going through, and they've done a great job of trying to tell the news and so forth. And then another, I think it was Lance on there that joined the club, is that I think Courtney and them put out a newsletter, I think every other month or every 3 months, and about our, what's going on in the company. But we definitely, if there's an event out there that anybody thinks we should be at, please let us know. We are progressively moving to where we can get out further than, it's ironic enough. Our three largest states is Texas, Florida, and California. And in California, I have not yet once been out there to promote Hooten Young. And so we need to do a better deal. If you said, hey, what things you got to do better? Well, once we got to get out there on the road. We got to get boots on the ground, and we got to get out there and meet some of these folks. And we haven't just been able to do that, but we are in the future. That's what we're planning.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing a fantastic job. I think more people know about you than you may believe. I've got to say to Courtney, she was fantastic to deal with throughout the entire process. I'll tell you, she's quick on the email. That's for sure. So she's made this whole process and transition really pretty smooth. So I can't think.
I'll tell you, Scott, we've told everybody who wants to hire, you're not going to hire her. Courtney is ours, and we love her, and she will be part of our family forever. And I even told my wife, I said, no, you can't hire her. And it just goes on. How many people call me and say, hey, Tim, we would like to hire Courtney? I said, nope, you're not going to hire her. But she's wonderful. She's done a great job. And I got to tell you, our whole team of people that we have now has been super. And they're very dedicated to Hooten Young and the story and promoting it. It's been great. We're actually doing a big event in December up in D.C. for the Army-Navy game. And so we go to that every year. And it feels like I still donate to West Point because of the idea of what they stand for and what they believe. And so we we're big proponents of the Army Navy game, even though we only root for the Army. We like the Navy except for 5 hours and a year, and that's during the game. But other than that, we love that stuff. It's really good.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. I'd say keep doing what you're doing. I think, more people are bound to know about your whiskey and cigars. And again, I think it's such a natural pairing, just to allow people to kind of come together and have good conversation and all of that. So, all right, I think we can, we'll kind of wrap it up with that. So besides kind of Instagram, is there any way anybody can kind of reach out to you guys or Courtney or anybody like that if they want any more information?
Well, Courtney's listening. She's been answering her Hooten Young under the comments, but we're reachable. Actually, one of the guys I just saw it a few minutes ago. I can't remember where it was, but that he's going to be. Oh yeah, there's Joshua. He's going to see us at the PCA next month. Both Norm and I will be at the PCA the third week of March. To reach out to us, the best thing is going to be Courtney because we are busy doing this stuff. And unfortunately, is that I'm the worst in returning text messages and emails. I don't know why, but I am. And but Courtney is very responsive to that. But reach out to her. And Courtney, can you, since you're listening, can you put on the comments of how they want to get a hold of you? And then I guess she asked, is there any questions you might have? Do we have any questions from anybody by chance?
Yeah, I always try to open it up the last 5 minutes or so if there's any question anybody has. I'll say if you do connect with Joshua, he is probably one of the more versed people I know in cigars. Period. That guy knows a thing or two about cigars. So I hope you're able to connect with Josh. He's a great guy. He's just down the road from me. So he's a local guy, but he is super knowledgeable in whiskey and especially cigars. So
Scott, it's funny because most of your viewers from Wisconsin, or are they from all over the place?
They're all over the country. Yeah.
So if anybody hadn't been to Wisconsin, it's an awesome place. I was telling Scott earlier that I go fishing up in Minocqua, which is north of Wausau, and it's beautiful country. It's just beautiful country. The only thing you got to be careful with is cheese curds and brats. I'd be 100 pounds heavier if I lived up there. So, but it's a beautiful place.
Yeah. You're getting, when you get up that way, you're getting into God's country. That's a little ways for us, but still that is beautiful, beautiful country up there. And there's a lot of people who have cabins and all of those things up there. And people spend a lot of part of their summers up that way, just vacationing, whatever it may be. But that is beautiful country up there. So, all right. What, anybody else got anything for either Norm or Tim? What's anyone got? All right. What do we got here?
It was funny. I see a comment on here about most of us aren't Canadian at all.
There's a little bit of joke because people think like because I live in Wisconsin that I'm so close to Canada. My wife's Canadian, so I've somehow become like the unofficial official Canadian, even though I don't live in Canada. So, but yeah, when you start getting up into Minocqua, I don't want to say you're close to Canada, but you're not that far. I'll say that. So
the question that someone just had, Northwest Bourbon, if you go into your local AFI stores, you can order by special order, and I think they have it. Am I right, Norm? Norm, can you hear me? Yeah, so my understanding, you can go in your AV store, your Classic store, and you can request it as a special order. We're trying to get with AFIs. We've had a little bit of a snafu. What it is that the way the bigger companies like AFIs and these bigger groups do, they deal with called Nielsen reporting. And Nielsen reporting is, Total Wine and the bigger houses report to this reporting house how many gets bought and all that kind of stuff. And so what happens is that, like, for example, when we first started here in Florida, we were in 257 different independent stores, and we weren't any large ones. But to get on the Nielsen reporting, you have to be reported in. So the idea is now we're reporting to the Nielsen reporting. One of our deals this year is trying to get on the 2025 roster bottles in the AFEs. I mean, we know Tom Scholl, who's the president, all that kind of stuff, but they have their benchmarks that they have to let us in, and hopefully we're going to get in there. But right now we have 5 AFE stores, and I think they're pretty large ones. I think that's right, Norm, is that they buy special order, and I think the same 5 buy our cigars as well.
Yeah.
I think Norm's check back in. I think he had to check out and check back in.
Yeah, he'll probably pop back in. Sometimes just a little bit of a reset. This is always a good question. When you don't have the opportunity to drink any Hooten Young, what's your other go-to?
Well, generally, no. I listen. At the end of the day, I drink them all. I have about 800 different bottles of whiskey somewhere in this house. And I drink about everything. I even smoke other people's cigars. I mean, you can't appreciate what you have until you do something else. And so, you always get this comparative. I mean, you got, even with guys, Jim Beam has a good whiskey. I mean, it's funny is that I got Angel's Envy. I got it all. Mm-hmm. And I have Pappy. And here's an ironic thing. The CFO of Disney was at the house about a couple months ago, and I offered him a bottle of Pappy, and he says, "Tim, I don't want Pappy." I said, "What do you want?" He says, "I only want one thing. I want Hooten Young." Oh, I'm offering a bottle that cost me probably $5,000, but he in turn he just wanted the Hooten Young. Now, in some way, he's a CFO, so he's very cheap. So he doesn't want the expensive stuff. But at the same time, too, it's like, I like it all. It's just not some bottles are cheap. It might be $35. It might be $300. Essentially, they're all good. They're all pretty good.
Yeah.
Love It whiskey by real whiskey lovers.
Yeah.
I love
it's one of those things. It is. It's all about sharing. He could have had probably whatever he wanted, and he was in the moment. You're one of the brand owners, and why not drink that whiskey along with you? I mean, that's where it becomes a personal thing. I think that's one of the great things about whiskey and cigars. You can make it as personal as you want, and good, bad, indifferent. I mean, good is subjective, bad subjective. But I think when you're in the moment and you're sharing those moments and memories, it's what you make of it. So,
I mean, one thing is, like, for example, Horse Soldier has a great bottle, great juice. I mean, their juice is good, and so forth. And here's an example of something that I realized just within the last several months. I went to a place called Copper Shot in Bastrop, Texas, and he has his own whiskey, but he only sells it in Texas. And he used rainwater for the water itself, right? Mm-hmm. And I will tell you this: I thought for a $45 bottle, I thought it was fantastic. So you just never know. I mean, you could go to a small local whiskey distiller, and it could be great stuff. The problem is that they have a lot of times is that they don't know how to market outside their store, right? They got a limited number of what they can do or limited production that they can make. So those guys typically become that really boutique kind of place. We've moved from the boutique into more of the larger group. Somebody told us one time, said, "Hey, Tim, 80% of the boutique or the whiskey market that you're in is that do less than $1 million a year." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. We've been doing that for the last 2 years." And so we're in the top 20% of that group. And the thing is that we try to be true to our whiskey. I like it. I think our stuff is good. Is there stuff better? I'm sure there is. And I'm sure there's stuff that's worse. But guess what? Man, as long as you stay whiskey lovers, just love whiskey, right? Yep. So I love that. That's the way it should be. Norm, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Norm, what else do you have? Anything else you'd like to share?
No, sorry guys, I lost audio there for a second. I don't know what happened, but I could hear what you were saying. But nothing further to add. I appreciate you having us on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of those things I've been wanting to do, and kind of just following along and watching, and finally I reached out, and Courtney was nice enough to get back to me and kind of get things scheduled. So I'll say thank you to her for getting it set up, and thank you to both of you for joining tonight.
Hey, real quick, Lance actually mentioned about Philippines. We actually are opening up a distribution out of Hong Kong for the Asia Pacific market, which is going to be the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea, and parts of Hong Kong, of course, and further down. But we will be doing that in 2025. So somebody asked that question about the Philippines, but yeah, we're going to be in the international market in 2025.
Interesting. That's always that other hurdle and that other kind of big jump. I mean, that's a big jump in today's day and age. That's for sure. But kudos to you guys, and thank you for the stories. Thank you for sharing about the whiskey, the cigars, tying it all together. I think that's the most important part. And I think for a lot of us who, again, enjoy either one or the other or both, there's something that anybody can kind of relate to. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
One last thing real quick.
Yeah.
I can't see his name, Major something.
Yeah.
Hey, keep your eyes open. It could happen.
Oh.
The tequila is something that we really like. We've investigated it, and we have a name for it already. It's just trying to find the time to put it in. I'm working right now with RNDC. I talked to them today about it, and they're excited that they're looking for a tequila brand to run now through. And so, hey, keep your eye out for. It's called actually. What do we call it, Norm?
I think we talked about calling it Three Sabers, but
yeah. So Three Sabers is because his two sons went to academy, and so did my son. So that would be the Three Sabers. So it's trying to keep that together, but it's exciting. Well, listen, thank you very much, Scott, for tonight. We really appreciate it. And hey, anything we can do for you guys, let us know.
We appreciate it. Thank you guys, everything for everything. Thanks for just keeping it real and doing what you do. Again, thank you very much for your service. And none of us can, we all can't thank you enough. So thank you with that. So again, if anybody wants to reach out, you can reach out to Hooten Young. Courtney will take care of you. She'll direct you to where it is you need to go. But again, guys, thank you so much for joining, and we'll definitely be in touch. Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Scott. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Well, there you have it. So there's a little bit more about the Hooten Young brand, and I think that was one of the things that drew me to what it was that they were doing specifically, was that combo of both the whiskey and the cigars, and just making whatever that moment is that you've got, one or both, exactly that. And it allows you to just kind of slow things down. So that was one of the things I always said. That's one of the health benefits to both of those, is not necessarily from a medical side of things, but in today's day and age, as fast paced as everything is and as stressed out as people are, it's probably one of the things that allows people, maybe outside of music, it's kind of that combo that allows people to slow down. Because if you got a nice glass of whiskey and a great cigar, if you're planning on smoking the entire cigar, depending on the size of what it is, you're going to be there for a little while. So you don't have anything to do but sit there and enjoy the moment. So with that, I am going to jump on to Patreon only live here in about maybe 10 minutes. Jason and I will be on. We'll be maybe sipping through the newest release that we just had not this past Friday, the Friday before, the Nashville Barrel. We'll give you guys a couple updates. So if any of you guys want to jump on, we'll open it up eventually. I know Marty was there, Lance was in there, Jake is in there. So yeah, for Doug was in there. So yeah, if you guys want to jump on here in a few minutes, I'll send out a link through Patreon. But next week I won't be doing a live. I'll be actually out of the country, and for next week. So I'll be back probably the following week, hopefully to kind of give you guys a little update and hopefully meet back up and do all that. So thank you guys so much. Greatly appreciate everybody joining tonight. Again, like I said, not next week. The following week we'll be back. But yeah, next 10 or 15 minutes, look for a link to pop up in Patreon. would love to kind of chat with you guys a little bit more, give you some updates and all of that. So with that, again, thank you guys so much. Remember, it's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers. Make sure you find yourself a little Hooten Young and maybe a cigar or two. Cheers, guys.